Everyone, I brought a little friend along with me to help me out. So I'm Kat, and this is my debut novel, In the Shadow of Blackbirds, from Amulet Books. And as was already mentioned, I am a writer right here from Hillsboro, so I'm really excited to be here talking about the novel right here on my own turf. I'd like to give a big thanks to NIWA, Primrose and Tumbleweeds, and Jacobson's Books for inviting me to come speak tonight, and for also for hosting these amazing events. Thank you for helping to bring art and culture and literature to downtown Hillsboro. I enjoy seeing it flourish in our community here. I'm also excited to be discussing this book on the eve of the Halloween season. This is very much a Halloween sort of novel. You heard a little tiny bit about what this book is about, and I'm also going to read my publisher's short synopsis that they sent out to libraries because I really like the way they summarize the plot. In San Diego, I might bring this down a little short here. In San Diego in 1918, as deadly influenza and World War I take their toll, 16-year-old Mary Shelley Black watches desperate mourners flock to seances and spirit photographers for comfort, and despite her scientific leanings, must consider if ghosts are real when her first love, killed in battle, returns. And yes, I named my main character after the author of Frankenstein. One thing the synopsis this particular synopsis doesn't mention is that my protagonist is a Portland girl. She's sent down to San Diego when her father's arrested for treason here in Oregon, so there is an Oregon connection to this book. Now, I've been a fan of ghost stories ever since I was a child. In fact, I still have the very first ghost books I ever owned. I don't know if anyone had copies of these. This is 13 Ghostly Tales. I got this from my school's Scholastic book orders. So, good, yay, Scholastic books. See, if you buy your kids Scholastic books, they might grow up and be authors and holding them up years later. This is The Ghost Next Door by Wiley Folks St. John, about the ghost of a girl who drowned and the mysteries surrounding her death. It might have also been a Scholastic book order, but I really, really love these novels. I like really scary movies. I grew up in the 70s and early 80s, and we had The Watcher in the Woods. This is a really freaky Disney movie that I was talking to my sister about on the phone today, and I still can't say that title to her without her getting really freaked out. So if you want a good Halloween movie, Watcher in the Woods. It's got Betty Davis in it. It was from like 1982, so it was an older Betty Davis. I've also been a fan of history ever since I was pretty young, especially the late 1800s and early 1900s, and bizarre tidbits in history. And one of the first things people ask me about In the Shadow of Blackbirds is where I got my first ideas for writing this book, and it goes way back to when I was 12 years old. I used to watch the show Ripley's Believe It or Not, hosted by Jack Palance, around the same time I was watching Watcher in the Woods. And one time they had an episode about the Cottingley fairies. And I know not everyone's going to be able to see this photograph, but afterwards, if you want to come get a better look. If you're unfamiliar with the Cottingley fairies, this is a real-life story of two girls in England, Elsie and Frances. In the years 1917 and 1920, they claimed to photograph fairies in their backyard. And people believed them. Grown-ups believed them. Educated grown-ups believed them. One of their biggest supporters was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, who was a staunch believer in spiritualism, proof of life after death. He really believed in these photographs. Even expert photographers believed in them. And it wasn't until the late 1970s when these were really officially proven to be a hoax. And there's even a great video, it's on my website. I copied it from YouTube, but one of the girls, as an older woman, was explaining how they did the photographs and how she had drawn the fairies herself and just did paper cutouts. And the narrator of Ripley's Believe It or Not, Jack Palance, said that the reason people believed so strongly in these photographs was because this was during and right directly after World War I. And they said people believed in them because this time period this World War I time period was so horrifying, and they needed something to believe in. And I remember even at the age of 12 wondering exactly how atrocious this era had been if adults were willing to believe that fairies could be caught frolicking in the countryside, and that really stuck with me. Years later, in about 1997, when I was a grown-up myself, I stumbled upon an article in Smithsonian Magazine called "The Man Who Believed in Fairies" by Tom Huntington. And once again, I learned about the Cottingley fairies. And I also learned about the history of seances in America and the big boom in seances, both in the Civil War time period and during World War I. And I thought, you know, I keep stumbling upon this history. This would make a really good setting for a book. And so I dug a little bit further into World War I to find out exactly why it was so awful that people were believing in seances of fairies. I learned about all the horrors that people were experiencing fighting in the war, as well as the people waiting back home for their loved ones. And I also learned about the 1918 Spanish influenza, which was a mysterious strain of the flu that appeared seemingly out of nowhere. And in the fall of 1918, it ended up killing millions of people around the globe. In fact, far more people died from this flu than they did from the war itself. So I wrote a book set in 1918 involving the war, the flu, and seances. And that, actually wrote a couple different versions of that book, and that book didn't really go much of anywhere at all. I'm one of those authors, like many authors, who ended up taking the really long and difficult road to publication. I tried for 15 years to write books for an adult audience. Over those years, I signed with 2 different literary agents. I had 2 completed manuscripts make the round to publishers. I won some awards, but I could never land a publishing contract, and it was pretty frustrating. And publishers tended to tell me that there was no market for historical fiction. It was too hard to market. My fiction crossed too many genre lines. They wanted one genre only. And my fiction was too dark for adult female readers. So in the fall of 2009, I had a chat with my current literary agent. She had already been representing me for 2 years at that point. She had tried to actually sell one of those earlier manuscripts without any success. But I had a chat with her and said, you know, I'd really like to revisit this old idea I had of setting a book in 1918 involving World War I, the flu, and spiritualism. And I'm thinking about having a teenage protagonist. And she was just starting to really represent young adult fiction at that point. I had signed with her when she was kind of a newer agent. At this point, she was signing all these young adult authors and really selling their books quite successfully. So she told me to run with that idea. So in about November of 2009, I started writing In the Shadow of Blackbirds. I was encouraged to make the book as dark, gritty, and imaginative as I wanted it to be, which I was never told when I was writing adult fiction for adults. I, again, mixed several different genres, which, like I said, I was discouraged from doing by publishers when I was trying to write for adults. This book is a mixture. It's a ghost tale, a mystery, a horror story, a love story, and a coming-of-age tale. And it also contains elements of dystopian and apocalyptic fiction because of this bizarre 1918 setting, which when I was researching it, it kind of hit me that this is a real-life dystopian setting. So it really is quite a mixture of a few different things. Madeleine L'Engle, or L'Engle, I actually, before I came here, I realized that all these years I've been pronouncing her last name L'Engle, and it's L'Engle. Madeleine L'Engle from A Wrinkle in Time once famously said, "You have to write the book that wants to be written. And if the book will be too difficult for grown-ups, then you write it for children." Doing exactly that, writing for a younger audience, changed my entire life. In October 2011, I sold In the Shadow of Blackbirds to Amulet Books in New York. On April 2nd of this year, the book debuted to critical acclaim and was named one of Booklist's top 10 horror fiction for youth for 2013. Even though my journey to publication was a long one, when all is said and done, I'd say it was well worth the wait. I'm incredibly proud that In the Shadow of Blackbirds is my big debut in the literary world. I'm going to now read a short scene from the book, but first of all, I wanted to also quickly mention that the book contains photographs inside them. I decided to include photos from the Spanish influenza. There's many chilling, these are all archival, real photographs, I didn't make these up. There's many chilling photos of people dressed in their gauze flu masks trying to ward off the germs. So I put those in there. We have some photos from World War I, including some World War I propaganda posters. There's 2 of those posters in here. And it contains early 20th century spirit photography. Spirit photography during this time period, this was like the fairy photographs, another thing that people really believed in during, and this goes back to Civil War history as well. Photographers would invite grieving customers into their studios. They'd have them sit for a portrait, and in the resulting photograph, the spirits of the customer's departed loved ones might be standing there with them. And this type of photography plays a big role in the plot of In the Shadow of Blackbirds. So I found a few real life ones. This one here, I know not everyone can see it, but this is a 1920 spirit photograph of a man standing with a ghostly head behind him. So I'm going to read to you one of my ghostly scenes. This is from chapter 9, which is called Blue Smoke and Whispers. It's a scene where my protagonist, Mary Shelley Black, is at the funeral of her first love and childhood friend, Stephen Embers. He was a 17-year-old photographer who enlisted in the war at the age of 17 and ended up getting killed overseas in battle. Mary Shelley begins the book as she doesn't believe in ghosts at the beginning. This is a scene where she's starting to move from skeptic to believer, however, and she's starting to question her entire way of looking at life and death. I stepped toward the casket, my lungs wheezing and my legs rubbery. It was just the 2 of us up there, Stephen and me. I laid my non-bandaged hand on the flag covering the wood and tried to envision the way he looked when he watched me from his staircase, the interest in his brown eyes, the dimpled grin blooming across his face, the Verne novel lying open in his lap. The funeral room closed around us, becoming as intimate as the Embers' peacock green sitting room, where we had dared to inch closer to one another. Stephen, I whispered, I've hung both of your photographs on my bedroom wall. I know we've never believed much in ghosts, but I have to wonder, were you in my room yesterday? Were you visiting your photos? Or me? I closed my eyes and blocked out the hum of conversations behind me. Do you know who I am, Stephen? Nothing happened that indicated he had heard me. My lips shook beneath my flu mask. It's Shell, Stephen. Mary Shelley. I'm here for you, all right? I've been unwell, but I never miss saying. I gulped down a lump as sharp as a razor blade. I even wore one of my gigantic hair bows for you because I thought it would entertain you, like when we were kids. I'd give anything to hear you. I stopped, for a heavy weight, thick and poisonous, had settled across my shoulders. My mouth filled with the hot middle flavor of rage. The fabric below my hand prickled with static, which made my heart pound. Stephen? My voice rose an octave. I ran my fingers along the flag and shut my eyes again. Are you all right? The flavor in my mouth grew more intense. The flag beneath my hand sparked and crackled. Everything else in the room slipped away. Is something wrong, Stephen? I asked again. Feeling in my bones, I'd hear an answer. 3 heartbeats passed. A whisper brushed against my ear. Very wrong. Thank you very much, and happy Halloween a little early.